This is the story of a deserted town I'm going to tell you. It's not a tale I share lightly, because even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see the town's empty streets, the broken windows, and the silence that didn't feel like peace, but like something holding its breath. It started when my cousin Arjun went missing. He was a travel vlogger, always chasing the next strange place to film. One day, he sent me a short voice message. "Hey, I found something interesting. A town not on any maps. Locals call it Dharana. Looks abandoned. I'll explore and send footage tonight." But he never did. After 3 days of silence, I knew something was wrong. The police filed a missing person report, but there wasn't much they could do. They said if he was really in some lost town, they had no idea where to start. I couldn't just sit back. Arjun was like a brother to me. So I packed a bag, took his last known coordinates, and drove out. The last village before the trail was small and quiet. I asked around, but people got uncomfortable when I mentioned Dharana. One old woman pulled me aside and whispered, "That place, it swallows people. If you go there, don't look behind you, no matter what you hear." I laughed nervously, thinking she was just being superstitious. I wish I hadn't. The path beyond the village led into thick forest. I followed it for 2 hours until the trees suddenly cleared. And there it was, Dharana. It looked frozen in time. Houses with peeling paint, shutters swinging in the breeze, power lines long dead and hanging low. Not a single sign of life. But the strange thing was, the town didn't feel empty. It felt full, like it was holding something back. I walked through the main street, calling Arjun's name. Nothing. Just the crunch of gravel beneath my boots and the wind brushing past my ears. Then I found his camera. It was lying outside what looked like a general store. The lens was cracked, and the battery was dead, but the memory card was still inside. I pocketed it and looked around. Still no sign of him. That's when I noticed the poster. It was pinned to the wall with rusted nails, faded, weathered, but I could still make out the words, "Welcome to Dharana. Population 241. Visitors 1. I thought it was some weird joke until I looked down the street and saw another poster nailed to a telephone pole, same design. But this one read, "Welcome to Dharana. Population 241. Visitors 2. I didn't want to believe what that meant. I turned around and started heading back toward the trail. Except it wasn't there. The forest had vanished. In its place were more buildings. More alleys. More broken windows. The path I'd come through was gone, as if it had never been there. I tried not to panic. I told myself it was just disorientation, that I'd circle back. But every turn took me deeper. The streets twisted in ways that didn't make sense. I passed the same corner 3 times, even though I kept changing direction. Then came the whispering. Faint at first, then louder. Not angry, not threatening, just there. Like people talking just behind a wall. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them crawling into my ears. I ran into a building, a school, I think. Old blackboards, desks turned over, and drawings. Dozens of them. Children's sketches pinned to the wall with bent nails. All the drawings showed the same figure, tall, faceless, with long arms and sharp fingers. In every image, it stood behind a child, its hand just about to touch. And then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging. I hid in a closet, holding my breath. The steps came closer, and then stopped right outside the door. Silence. Then 3 soft knocks. I didn't answer. The door creaked, but it never opened. I stayed there until the whispering stopped, and the air felt a little less heavy. Then I bolted. By now, the sky had turned a color I can't even describe. Not quite black, not quite purple, just wrong. There was no sun, no moon, just that strange half-light that made everything look like it was rotting in place. I ended up in a house near the edge of the town, or what I thought was the edge. Inside, I found a wall covered in photographs, black and white, all old. And every photo showed people standing stiffly in front of buildings in Dharana, but their eyes were scratched out, except for one photo. It was fresh. Color. It was me. Taken just hours ago, standing in the middle of the street, looking confused. I dropped the photo and ran. I don't know how long I ran. The streets went on forever. I passed places I'd never seen before and others I'd seen too many times. Then I saw a figure. Not the tall one from the drawings. This was Arjun. He was standing in the middle of the street, barefoot, pale, eyes blank. Arjun! I ran to him and grabbed his shoulders. It's me. I'm getting you out. He didn't react. I shook him harder. He blinked slowly and said, You came for me. Now you'll stay too. And then he smiled. A slow, painful smile that didn't belong to him. I let go. His body crumpled to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. I ran again. Suddenly I found myself in front of the same store where I'd found his camera. I don't know how. I was too tired to think. But something was different. The poster had changed. Welcome to Dharana. Population, 242. Visitors, 0. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. A hiker found me unconscious on the edge of the forest. They said there's no town there, no Dharana, no houses, nothing but trees. I showed them the photos from the camera. They were gone. All the files corrupted. The memory card fried. But I know what I saw. I know what I lived. And sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I hear the whispering again. They're still looking. Still waiting. So if you ever find yourself on an empty road, and someone tells you about a town that's not on any map, don't go, because Dharana doesn't let you visit. It makes you stay. Forever. This is the story of a deserted town I'm going to tell you. It's not just a story. It's something I lived through. Something I never thought I'd survive. So listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you is real, and it still haunts me to this day. It began one cold evening in late October, just when the wind started to carry a bite and the trees were nearly stripped of their leaves. My friends and I, Jake, Raya, and Samir, were on a road trip. We were 4 hours away from the city, somewhere deep in the countryside. The roads were quiet, and the sky was turning a strange, dark orange as the sun dipped behind the hills. We weren't planning to stop, but the car started acting strange. The engine stuttered, the lights flickered, and before we could even react, it just died. Right in the middle of a long, narrow road with no signs of life around. Jake got out to check under the hood, and that's when we noticed something ahead in the distance. A town, small, quiet, and strange. It wasn't on the GPS. In fact, even the road signs didn't show its name. But we were stranded, and we needed help. So we started walking. The entrance to the town had a rusted sign barely hanging on its pole. It read, Welcome to Duskfield. The letters were fading, and something about it gave me chills. We walked down the main street. All the houses looked abandoned. Windows broken, doors hanging open, curtains torn. Not a single light, not a single sound. Yet we felt watched. We split up to look for help. I know, stupid idea, right? But we were tired, desperate, and didn't expect what we were about to face. I went with Ria while Jake and Samir took the other side of the street. We knocked on doors, called out, peeked through broken windows. Nothing. Not even rats. Then we found the church. It stood at the center of the town, tall and strangely untouched. The wooden doors creaked open when we pushed them, and a strange warmth hit us as we stepped in. It smelled like old books and burnt wax. The candles inside were fresh, lit. That was the first sign that someone was here. Or something. We called out again. Hello? Anyone here? No answer. Just the sound of the wind outside. And then the bell rang. A loud, long, echoing bell from the top of the church tower. Neither of us touched it. We ran out. I tried calling Jake and Samir, but there was no signal. The wind grew stronger. The sun had set completely now, and the whole town turned a shade darker, like it had sunk into night faster than the rest of the world. We found Jake standing in front of a house, pale and shaking. He pointed at the window and said, There was someone standing there, watching me, and when I turned away and looked back, they were gone. We tried to laugh it off, but Samir wasn't answering his phone. We looked for him for what felt like an hour. Then we heard a scream, short, distant, from the woods behind the town. We ran. Branches scratched our faces as we pushed through the trees, following the sound. That's when we found Samir's phone, lying on the ground, screen cracked, flashlight, still on. No sign of him. We didn't speak, just looked at each other and started heading back. But something had changed. The town didn't look the same. The buildings were darker, older somehow. Like they'd aged 50 years in the time we were gone. The streets were covered in mist now. And that warmth we'd felt before had turned into a biting cold that settled deep in our bones. We decided to stay inside the church for the night. It felt safer, more contained. But when we got there, the doors were shut tight, locked from the inside. I banged and shouted. Nothing. Then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was the wind. But no, it was too clear, too close. They shouldn't have come. They never leave. The whispers surrounded us. They weren't coming from any one direction. They were everywhere. All around. In our ears. In our heads. We ran into the nearest house and slammed the door shut. It was filthy inside. Dusty furniture, mold on the walls, and photos, hundreds of them. All the same people. Pale, hollow-eyed, staring straight at the camera with no expression. But one photo caught my eye. It was the four of us. Me, Rhea, Jake, and Samir. Standing at the entrance of Duskfield. Same clothes. Same time of day. But the photo was old. Yellowed, cracked. Dated, October 1987. That's when I felt the full weight of the fear hit me. We had never taken that photo. We didn't sleep, couldn't. The house moaned around us. Shadows moved past the windows, though we never saw anyone. Rhea cried. Jake wouldn't speak. He just stared at the photo in his hand, over and over. By morning, if you could call it that, because the sky never got brighter, we decided to leave. Walk. Run. Anything to get away. But the road we came from, it was gone. Just trees. Endless, black trees in every direction. And that's when we saw them. Figures, standing between the trunks. Still. Watching. Tall and thin, their heads tilted. Slightly as if curious. Or angry, we ran. Branches cut our arms. Mud pulled at our shoes. The town behind us disappeared into fog. And then, silence. We collapsed in a ditch beside a broken fence on the other side of the hill. And there it was. The road. Our car. Just like we left it. But Samir was never found. His name never showed up in any missing persons list. The police searched Duskfield, but they found nothing. They said the town doesn't exist. No record, no map, no sign of anyone living there in decades, and no church. But I know what we saw. A few weeks later, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Same one as before. The four of us standing at the entrance of Duskfield. Only this time, Samir's face was scratched out. I've never told anyone else about this until now, but I had to. Because sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispers, and when I close my eyes, I see those pale faces in the woods. Watching. So if you ever break down in the middle of nowhere, and you find a town that isn't on the map, that smells too clean, that feels too quiet, don't go in. Because once Duskfield lets you in, it might never let you leave. This is the story of a deserted town I'm going to tell you. It's not a rumor, not some made-up horror to entertain kids around a bonfire. This really happened, and every word I say is true, whether you choose to believe me or not. But I warn you, once you hear about this town, it'll stay with you, just like it stayed with me. It began 3 years ago when I was driving cross-country after quitting my job. I needed space, air, silence. You know that kind of stillness that lets you think? I was chasing that. I didn't have a destination. In mind, just a long stretch of road ahead of me and a playlist that lasted hours. Around the third day of driving, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, between two dusty towns I don't even remember the names of, I saw a turnoff. There was no sign, just an old gravel road and a crooked wooden post with faded paint. But I swear, I heard something. A voice. Whisper soft. Like it was calling my name. I ignored it. An hour later, I passed it again. That made no sense. I had been driving straight, no turns. But there it was. The same turnoff. The same crooked sign. This time, I took it. I thought maybe it was a shortcut, or just my tired brain playing tricks on me. The gravel crunched under my tires as I drove through tall trees that blocked out the sunlight. It felt like the road was closing in on me, but I kept going. And then, I saw it. The town. There was no welcome sign, no people. Just rows of buildings, houses, shops, even a church. All crumbling, all forgotten. The air was thick with dust, and the sky looked bruised, like evening had arrived early. I stepped out of my car and looked around. It was completely silent. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. No. This silence had weight. It pressed against your ears like water when you're underwater, like something was holding its breath. I told myself I'd stay just a few minutes. Take a look around, maybe get some photos. I didn't even lock my car. That was mistake number one. I walked down the main street. The windows were broken, the doors hanging open. I passed an old diner where plates still sat on the tables, as if people had just left in the middle of their meals. There was an overturned baby stroller in front of a grocery store, a playground with a single swing swaying slowly, though the air was still. No animals. No wind. Just that heavy silence. And then I started noticing the faces, not people. Faces. In the windows. At first I thought it was shadows, tricks of the light. But the longer I looked, the clearer they became. Pale, hollow-eyed, unmoving. Just watching. Not blinking. Not breathing. I turned back, but the road was gone. I ran to where I'd left my car, and it was still there. But everything beyond it was different. The trees were closer. The road that brought me here was no longer a road. Just dirt and mist. That's when the bells rang. The church at the end of the street started ringing its bell. Loud, slow, deep. And with every toll, the fog rolled in heavier. It poured into the streets, curled around my legs, and filled the air with a smell. Sweet, metallic, like rust and roses. I ran into the diner for cover. It was dark, but dry. I sat in the corner booth, trying to calm myself, trying to tell myself I was just tired. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel and this was all a dream. That's when I saw it. Carved into the table beneath my fingers. Don't stay past dark. I bolted back outside. But everything had changed. The buildings were different. Older. More decayed. Some of them had collapsed completely. The swing at the playground had stopped moving. And the faces in the windows? They were gone. That would have been better. But now they were in the streets, standing still, just watching. Men, women, even children. All with the same sunken eyes, the same grayish skin, mouths slightly open as if mid-breath. They didn't move. They didn't speak. But I knew, I felt, that they saw me. I didn't think, I just ran. Through alleyways, across cracked sidewalks, past rusted cars and broken fences. The fog chased me like a living thing. And in the distance, the bell kept tolling. I found shelter in a library. Books were scattered across the floor, as if someone had tried to pack up and failed. In the center of the room was a spiral staircase. I climbed it, needing to be higher, farther from whatever was down there. At the top, I found a study room. Old lamps, dust-covered shelves, and on the wall, something that stopped me cold. A map of the town. Only it wasn't a map with streets or names. It was a spiral, a tight, endless spiral drawn in black ink. In the center, a red X above it, scrawled in shaky handwriting, "You can't leave the spiral. You are in it now." I looked out the window and realized something awful. Every turn I'd taken, every alley I ran through, it had brought me inward, closer to the center. And that's where the church stood. I didn't want to go there. Every part of me screamed to run in the opposite direction. But there was no opposite anymore. The town had folded in on itself. There was no out, only in. So, I walked to the church. The bell had stopped. The doors were open. Inside, the pews were empty, but the walls were covered in more carvings. Time is stuck. They see you. Only the marked can leave. And then I saw the altar. There was a mirror. Old, cracked, covered in dust. I walked toward it, and when I wiped it clean, I saw something I can't forget. Not myself, but dozens of faces, behind me, standing, waiting. The last thing I remember was one of them reaching for me. Then I woke up on the side of the road. My car was nearby, engine still warm. The sun was rising, but the town was gone. I tried to find it again. That gravel road? It's not there anymore. I've checked maps, satellite images, nothing. But I didn't leave untouched. Since that day, I see reflections that don't match. Sometimes in mirrors or windows, I see that church, that spiral, those faces. And once, just once, I saw myself. Still in that town. Still walking the spiral. So if you're ever on a lonely road, and you see a turnoff you don't remember, with no name and no sign, don't take it. Because once the town sees you, you don't really leave. Not ever. This is the story of a deserted town I'm going to tell you. It's not from a book, not something I read online or heard from a friend of a friend. No, this happened to me. And if I close my eyes, I can still smell the dust in the air, feel the way the wind stopped blowing when I crossed the boundary, and hear the voices that shouldn't have been there. It all started on a road trip I took last summer. My friends and I were supposed to go together, but one by one, they dropped out. Work, family, emergencies, whatever. I decided to go alone. I needed the break. I wanted peace, a little solitude. Maybe a few good photos and stories to tell when I got back. I was driving through Rajasthan, somewhere between Jaisalmer and Barmer, when my GPS glitched out. It showed a road cutting through a dry valley that I hadn't noticed before. The map called it Tarakpur. Never heard of it. But I had plenty of daylight left, and something about the road pulled at me. The turn came up without warning. A narrow, cracked stretch of faded asphalt, swallowed up by tall grass and thorny shrubs. No signs, no markers, just that strange name on the GPS, Tarakpur. I turned. The road was long and empty. The sky started to turn a dull orange, and I noticed how quiet everything became. No birds, no cars, just the sound of my tires crunching along the broken pavement. And then, after about 20 minutes of driving, I saw it. The town. Tarakpur sat, like a fossil in the valley, untouched by time. Faded houses lined the streets, withered trees leaned against cracked walls, and everything had a thick layer of dust, like no one had been there in years. I got out, camera in hand, and took a few photos. The place had that eerie beauty. Still forgotten, but not dead. That's when I noticed something strange. The dust on the street was completely undisturbed. No footprints, no animal tracks, not even leaves moving in the wind. Because there was no wind. Still, I told myself it was just a strange little place lost to time. India is full of such towns. I wandered deeper in. There was a well in the middle of a square, dry and cracked. A bicycle lay half buried in the dirt outside what looked like a school. A radio sat on a windowsill in a house with no door. I leaned in and turned the knob. To my surprise, it powered on for a second, crackling static, then went silent. Then I heard laughter, children's laughter. It came from the school, quick, distant, echoing. I called out, thinking maybe I wasn't alone, after all. But the moment my voice rang out, the laughter stopped. I stepped inside the school. Desks were overturned. The chalkboard had strange symbols scrawled across it. Not Hindi, not English, not anything I recognized. One drawing caught my eye on the back wall. A rough sketch of the town, done by a child's hand. But the buildings had faces, eyes, and the well in the center was drawn as a mouth with sharp teeth around its rim. I backed out. I started walking faster, suddenly aware of how deep I had gone into the town. I checked my phone. No signal. The battery dropped from 78% to 5% in seconds. Then it died. That's when I heard the bell. It came from a temple on the hill at the edge of the town. Deep, slow, and too loud for a place this empty. With every ring, something inside me pulled tighter, like my ribs were shrinking in my chest. Decided I'd had enough. I turned back to my car, but it wasn't there. I stood at the place where I'd parked it. The tire marks were still visible, but the car was gone, vanished. I spun around, my heart pounding. The town seemed different now, smaller somehow, the streets tighter, the buildings leaning in like curious onlookers. And the silence, it wasn't just quiet, it was watching. I started walking, any direction, just moving. Then I saw her, a woman, standing in the middle of the road, wearing a white sari, head slightly tilted. She wasn't facing me, but something about her posture made every part of me scream not to go near. She didn't move. I stepped back, slowly. Then she whispered. I couldn't understand the words, but they scratched at my ears like a record played backward. Something deeply wrong. My legs moved before I realized it. I ran. The houses blurred past me. My lungs burned. My heart felt like it would burst. I didn't stop until I collapsed behind a wall, gasping for air. That's when I noticed the writing, on the wall, scratched, in what looked like fingernails. You came too far. Now you're part of it. Suddenly I understood. Tarakpur wasn't just forgotten. It was feeding. I don't know how long I wandered after that. Hours. Days? Time bent around that place like heat in the desert. I slept in one of the houses, but even in sleep I saw things. The woman in white, children with empty eyes, a man with no skin, weeping beside the dry well, and always the bell, tolling in the distance. Eventually, I ended up in front of the well again. It was no longer dry. Black water shimmered at the bottom, and from it, something watched me. It spoke, not in words, but in feelings. Hunger, loneliness, joy, because I was still there. It wanted me to stay, to tell others, to lead more to it. That's when I saw my car, right next to the temple, clean, untouched. I ran to it, not caring how or why. The keys were still in the ignition. I started it and floored the accelerator. The moment I crossed the edge of town, the sky shifted. The wind returned. The radio crackled back to life. I looked in the mirror. Tarakpur was gone. Just open desert. No road. No sign. Nothing. I kept driving until I reached a dhaba on the highway. I must have looked like hell because the owner asked if I was okay. I just nodded and asked if he'd heard of Tarakpur. He frowned. That place, he said. It was buried under a landslide 50 years ago. No one's lived there since. They say the earth swallowed it. I didn't speak. Just left. Since then, I've never gone back. Never told many people this story because I know how it sounds. Like a bad dream, or a made-up tale. But I'm telling you now because I see the signs again, on maps that shouldn't update, in whispers on the radio, in the corners of mirrors. Tarakpur is still there. Waiting. And if you're ever driving through the desert and your GPS shows you a road that isn't really there, don't take it. Because once you enter that deserted town, you bring a part of it back with you. This is the story of a deserted town I'm going to tell you. It's not something you'd find in books or hear around a campfire. This is real, and I still wake up sweating when I think about it. So listen carefully. Don't drift off. Because this story has a way of crawling under your skin, just like the town itself did. It happened 2 years ago. I was doing a photography project for my final year in college. The idea was to capture forgotten places, old buildings, broken roads, anything left behind by time. I had already covered a few ghost towns, but none of them gave me what I needed. They were just empty. Dust and silence. Then I came across an old man in a diner in a tiny village. He saw my camera and asked what I was shooting. When I told him, he leaned in and said one word like it was a secret. Rain dusk. I blinked. Never heard of it. He smiled, but not in a friendly way. Not many have, and those who did don't talk about it. Then he handed me a wrinkled map. A red circle was drawn in shaky ink. It's not far, he said, but take this advice. Go before sunset, and don't stay. Not even a minute after dark. I should have listened. The town was about 20 miles from the main road. I drove through trees that grew thicker with every mile, branches stretching overhead like claws. Eventually, my GPS gave up, but I followed the map, and there it was, rain dusk. The sign was half rotten, barely holding on to its post. Everything about the place looked paused. Like time had stopped just before something terrible happened. The buildings were crooked and gray, like they'd been left out in the rain too long. No birds. No animals. Just wind whispering down the streets. Perfect, I thought. I started taking photos. The light was perfect. Gray clouds made the colors feel drained, eerie. I found an old store, its shelves still full of dusty cans. A school with broken desks, and faded drawings still taped to the walls. But not a soul in sight. I should have turned back when I noticed the sky. It was still early afternoon, but the clouds had thickened unnaturally fast, turning the sky almost black. I didn't think much of it. Just figured a storm was rolling in. But when I tried to leave, I realized something was wrong. The road back was gone. Not blocked. Not overgrown. Just gone. Like it had never existed. I walked back the way I came. Same buildings. Same street. No exit. I started to panic. Called for help. No signal. Not even static. My phone battery dropped 20% in minutes. That's when I heard the first sound. Footsteps. Not mine. I turned, expecting to see someone. But the street was empty. I took a few shaky breaths, tried to calm down, and went into a 2-story house near the center of town. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe I was just tired. The inside was cold, smelled like wet earth and old paper, a fireplace full of ashes, photos on the mantle of a family, father, mother, 2 children, all smiling, except the faces were scratched out. Every photo, every mirror, every surface that showed a reflection, ruined. The air turned heavier, like something was pressing against my chest. I went upstairs and found a bedroom. The bed was made, but there were small handprints on the windows. On the inside, I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner with my camera, clutching it like it could protect me. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke to the sound of the front door creaking open, then slow, dragging steps. I held my breath. They moved through the hallway, stopped, then began coming up the stairs, step by step. No rush, just a steady, heavy rhythm. I froze. Couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then the footsteps stopped right outside the room. The doorknob turned slowly, creaking, and the door opened. Just a crack. There was nothing there. But the feeling, the cold, something was in the house. Watching. Waiting. I stayed in that room until daylight returned. If you can call it daylight. It was still dark, but slightly less so. I ran outside. The road was back. My car was right where I left it, engine still warm like I'd never left it. I didn't look back. I drove until I saw people again. A gas station. A man behind the counter. Asked if I was okay. Said I looked pale. I told him everything. He listened, then slowly nodded. "You're lucky," he said. "Most who go to rain dusk don't come back at all. But if you do come back..." He didn't finish the sentence. Just looked at me with eyes full of something like fear. I thought it was over, that I'd escaped. But the real horror started after I got home. The photos I took, they weren't of buildings. Every single image showed people. Dozens of them. Standing still. Staring directly at the camera. Pale, hollow-eyed, wearing old clothes, like from the 1950s. Faces I never saw in person, and in every photo behind them, there was a shadow, A tall, dark figure with eyes like burning coals. It was never in the same place twice, sometimes on the rooftop, sometimes in a window. Once, standing right behind me, I deleted the photos, burned the memory card, but it didn't matter. The dreams began that week. I'd wake up in rain dusk, alone. Or so I thought. But then I'd hear the steps, the dragging, the whispers. You saw us. Now we see you. I moved cities, changed my number, tossed the camera. Nothing helped. The dreams still come, and each time the town looks more real, like it's getting closer. A few nights ago, I woke up to find dirt on my feet, mud on my floor, and my window open. There was a photograph on my desk, one I never took. It was me, standing at the edge of rain dusk, and behind me, that figure again. So, I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to warn you. If anyone ever offers you a map to a town you've never heard of, if a place shows up that isn't on any GPS, don't go. Don't even look at it. Because once you step into rain dusk, part of you never leaves. And maybe one night, when the sky turns dark too fast, and the air feels too still, you'll hear it too. Those footsteps. And when you do, don't open the door.